Welcome to Lunch with the Lord. I'm Pastor Mark, and we're in 1 Timothy chapter 5. We'll be starting verse 7 this lesson. But before we begin, Jeremiah 15:16, Thy words were found, and I did eat them. And thy word was unto me the joy and the rejoicing of my heart. Now, as we saw back in verse 6 last lesson, he says, but she that lives in pleasure is dead while she lives. And we saw that living in pleasure here is a well-to-do widow who has the means to live a luxurious life. She enjoys, maybe she's not very rich, but she has enough money to be able to enjoy life and live it as she wants to. And but as we saw also last lesson, that we know that riches can be a hindrance to a person's life. To the unsaved, riches can be a hindrance and can cause blindness to the things of God, the salvation of God, the blessings and the riches of God. And unsaved people don't see the things of God and as very important. They would much rather have their own, the worldly riches that they have. And they don't understand the comparison of the God's riches and the riches of this world system. And they don't understand that God's riches are much more valuable, much more important than anything of this world. So he says, when it says here that verse 6 that she is dead while she lives, it means that she is dead to the things of God. She's spiritually dead. And you know, many saved people who are rich can be spiritually, doesn't mean they're automatically, doesn't mean we go around and just because a person is rich and they go to church and they're saved doesn't mean they're spiritually dead. No, they can be. There are many rich. When we think of, in the book of Acts, there was a woman named Dorcas, right? She was a seller of purple. She had her own business. And I'm sure she was a well-to-do woman. But she heard the word of God and she took Paul and his men in. And she was, I believe she became a tremendous woman of God. So riches don't automatically mean that a person, that a Christian now is spiritually dead or anything like that. No. But riches, worldly wealth can cause a person, even a Christian, to become spiritually, in a sense, spiritually dead, where they desire the things of this world more than the things of God. Now in verse 7 he says, and these things give in charge that they may be blameless. Now this word they seems to be referring back to the family members of verse 4. It says, but if a widow have children and nephews. Now remember, nephews here, the Greek word is believed that it means grandchildren. So the word they in verse 7 seems to be referring back to these children and grandchildren. And Paul here tells Timothy to charge these children and grandchildren to take care of their widows. This is acceptable in God's sight, and it will be without reproach in the world's eyes. The world is watching. And when Christians don't take care of their own family members, they see. And they see what a testimony it is. So, in verse 7, and these things give in charge that they may be blameless. Blameless to their own Christian community, but also blameless to worldly people who watch them. Now, verse 8 says, but if any provide not for his own, and especially for those of his own house, he has denied the faith and is worse than an infidel. So it says here, if any if any provide not for his own, meaning his own family members, and especially those of his own house, he has denied the faith. When it says here he's denied the faith, to be a Christian means that we are to live our lives according to God's ways, with his heart and with his purpose. To care nothing for the needs of our own relatives is a testimony to the world that your faith in God and your faith in his word is very suspect. All right? So, when the world watches you, they see if you're taking care of family members who are in need. When you talk about, your relatives who are whatever, sick or in need, or they lose a job, they see what happens in what decisions you're making. Right? And I don't know about him or her. They always seem to be very religious. But they don't even offer help to their brother or sister or to their parent. And this is what people can think. People that you work with, go to school with, people that you are around. And we proclaim ourselves to be Christians, but when we also talk about people, family members, and things, and about them losing their job or in bad health or them in need, that kind of thing, and they watch to see whether we are helping out, because in a sense they kind of know that to be a Christian means that it is our obligation in the sight of God to help, to offer some kind of help. And it's not always financial help. It can be help, just availability help. So he says here, but if any provide not for his own, and especially those of his own house, he has denied the faith. The faith means the Christian faith as a whole. Christianity is all about helping others. That's what Christianity is about. The whole Bible is about how we help others. When we refuse to help others, especially family members, it goes against all that Christianity is and all that it stands for. So for us to be a testimony to our family members, for us to be a testimony to the world around us, we are, in a sense, it's our duty, but it's our obligation to help others. So he says here, he has denied the faith and is worse than an infidel. Now, infidel is apistos. And the prefix a means negative. And pistos means to believe. So, apistos means to be an unbeliever. An unbeliever. Look, even unbelievers take care of family members when they are in need. I'm sure you probably know people around you who are unbelievers. They don't go to church, and they've spoken to you about family members that they have in their family, mother, father, brother, sister, whatever. Maybe they were in a car accident and they're laid up in bed and they're helping out. Look, even unsaved people help their own family members. So for a Christian to not to take care of their own family members is to do it, to take them to a place even below the unsaved. For a Christian not to take care of those in need in their own family, in a sense, puts them on a level below the unbelievers. Paul is saying the Christian should really be ashamed of themselves. So Paul is saying that you've denied the faith. You're worse than an unbeliever. You should be ashamed of yourself. You're not doing what even the unbelievers are doing. Now, verse 9 here, we'll finish the lesson by beginning verse 9. It says, let not a widow be taken into the number under threescore years old, having been the wife of one man. Now, in verses 9 and 10, Paul here gives qualifications for widows to receive church support. So now Paul here, we've been talking about widows who deserve support from the church. Widows who are widows indeed. And now Paul here in these two verses, verses 9 and 10, he's going to give Timothy the qualifications for a widow who should be considered as being deserving of church support. Now, he says here, verse 9, let not a widow be taken into the number. Taken into the number here, the Greek word is katalego. Katalego. And kata means down, and lego means to speak, or to name something, or to call something. So, katalego means to write down in a list, to write something down, to list it. It means to put it in a register. The registry seems to be a list of names of widows that can be supported by the church. So Paul here is telling, let not a widow be written down, taken into the number, or taken into the registry of the names of women who can be supported by the church. Paul here in verses 9 and 10 mentions 8 qualifications for a widow in order for her to be supported by the church. Now he gives 8 of them here. Is that all of them? Maybe not. But there's 8 qualifications that Paul gives for these widows. At first glance, we may think that Paul is being very legalistic in his qualifications of worthy widows. But Paul is trying to protect the testimony of the church. Widows who represent God's heart are to be accepted. When Paul lays down these qualifications, he's doing it in order to protect the church, the testimony of the church. And we'll see that as we go through each one of these, all 8 of them, you'll see that the reason why Paul mentions these things is to protect the testimony of the church in the world around it. And to that these widows are to be accepted into the registry of widows to be supported by the church because they have a heart after God and they are for the things of God and they've given their life over to God. All right? So we'll continue that next lesson. But until then, walk with the Lord. I know He walks with you.